Hey everyone, welcome back to After Credits. I'm the man without a plan, and as you can probably tell, I'm going solo this week. God's Not Dead 2. It's weird because this isn't really my bag. Basically, let's get my bias out of the way. I am a non-believer, though I was raised in a Christian home. And so whenever I read reviews of these films that are completely bashing this entire Christianity in every single sense, I like to think that even though I'm not a believer, I can offer sort of a more moderate perspective. God's Not Dead 2 is produced by Pureflix. They had the first God's Not Dead, they did last year's Old Fashioned, and the big hit War Room. And they're a company that makes religious films, low-budget religious films, so with even a modest box office from all the Christian fans that go to see this movie, they get big profits. And the biggest profit, I believe, was from God's Not Dead 1. That movie, I think, made $63 million on a $2 million budget, so it's a great hit. Of course, we've got another one. And in this one, Melissa Joan Hart plays Grace Wesley. She's a high school history teacher who, when asked by one of her students about Jesus being parallel to Gandhi or Martin Luther King Jr. as terms of nonviolence, Miss Wesley responds by using Jesus's words as a parallel with Gandhi and whatnot. One of the other students in the class tells their parents are agnostic, atheist, throw in your anti-Christian label here, and they take her to court. And this goes all the way, I believe, to the 6th Circuit Court in Little Rock, Arkansas. As always, with these kind of reaction videos, I don't stray away from spoilers. So again, like the last one, spoiler alert. If you don't want to hear any spoilers and you want to watch this movie, or you want to see just what I have to think about it, skip to this time code here, and that'll be me giving you a sum up, and that'll be me giving you my score out of 6 stars. The thing that I have to say about God's Not Dead 2 primarily is that while the first one I thought went on some tangents, like the Muslim father beating his daughter just for being a Christian, the philosophy professor is not only an atheist, but a complete son of a bitch that ridicules his wife and basically does everything but physically abuse the main student. The stereotypes are still there. They're not as bad. I don't like that they're still there, but this movie does offer a more balanced viewpoints of its opinions. I feel like there are 5 movies in one here. You've got Melissa Joan Hart dealing with her lawyer, who is a non-believer. You've also got Pastor Dave from the first movie as the weird comic relief throwing in random tangents. There's the Asian kid who became friends with Josh Wheaton, the main protagonist from God's Not Dead 1. He's on his own, and he's trying to figure out these new questions of faith. He's asking Pastor Dave to help him out, and he's kind of navigating through what this newfound faith means in his life and his family's life, etc. You've also got the liberal blogger from the first one. She finds out her cancer's in remission, and so now she's juggling her own questions of faith, and kind of like God's Not Dead 1, which is also kind of like Paul Haggis's Crash, all these storylines weave in and out together to make, one supposedly complete story. I have the same complaint here that I had with Batman and Superman. This movie's too scattered. And I don't think it's necessarily that the movie's scattered, it's that the editing tends to be scattered too. They'll have these big scenes about Melissa Joan Hart and her main plot, and then randomly cut away to show what some other character is doing for about 45 seconds, then cut back to the main story. It feels like we're being interrupted. This TV show is being interrupted by commercials. And while the movie does better than the first one of kind of weaving these characters in and out together, it still feels kind of awkward. Anyway, Melissa Joan Hart, I haven't seen a lot of her since Sabrina the Teenage Witch, which is my childhood. She's playing a woman who's devout in her faith, but not really she's not really throwing it in your face like some other movies will have their protagonist being. She's just a Christian. She's not hiding the fact that she's a Christian. She's open about it, but she's just kind of living her life, and she's taking care of her elderly father, and she's just genuinely a nice, sweet person. And I really like how Hart plays her in this movie. For the first 20 minutes, Melissa Joan Hart's character is developed that she's this sweet person, that she's a devoted teacher, that she's trying to figure out new ways of getting her students involved in history. But as soon as this incident happens, where she's in her classroom and she's teaching about Martin Luther King and Gandhi as figures of nonviolence, I don't know if it's because I was raised the way I am, that I always thought it was kind of obvious to most people that Jesus is a historical figure. There's contention on whether or not he's the son of God or a prophet or whatnot, but I thought it was pretty apparent across the board that Jesus was a historical figure. He's a historical figure. Gandhi is a historical figure. Just put them together in history class, right? That seems obvious to me. And I know why the movie does this in this way. It's to basically make Miss Wesley's predicament that sympathetic. So when everybody jumps off the rails and makes this into a whole, the separation of church and state, Christians are being persecuted, is there evidence for Jesus's existence? They're pulling all these strands, all these questions, which are legitimate issues that we have contention about, but they're pulling it out of an issue that shouldn't be an issue. It kind of shoots itself in the foot. By downplaying the impact of this incident, you downplay the topics that you want to talk about because we're focused around this incident that really should be solved in about 30 minutes. One of my favorite parts in this movie is the leader of the prosecution, who I believe he's on Reaper. He was on that show Reaper as the devil, and he's got these great, these great furrowed eyebrows, and even his haircut kind of looks like he's about to sprout horns from the top of his head. I'll put the name of the actor here. He's the best at playing a villain or just a prick. When he's just accosting Melissa Joan Hart outside of the courthouse, basically saying, I hate you, I hate people like you and everything you stand for. I'm like, really? It's this kind of dialogue that basically sets the argument back to elementary school and playground squabbles. He makes the statement in the movie to the student's parents, who's basically just saying, God is dead. And you almost see lightning. Actually, the next shot is of the courthouse, and there's storm clouds in the corner. That's how just obvious this movie is with its filmmaking. There's a scene where Melissa Joan Hart is losing in court, and so the scene ends. We cut to an establishing shot from the courthouse, by the way. We are in the courthouse, we cut to an establishing shot of the courthouse, and then we're back with Melissa Joan Hart in the same room. I feel like a better way to get that across would have just been a shot of the entire audience, and then a dissolve to just her and the lawyer showing a passage of time. But it feels like that's just this movie's rhythm. You go from scene, establishing shot of another scene, another establishing shot, and it's a very monotonous rhythm that if you don't watch a lot of movies, I don't think you'll be bothered by it, because I'm that guy that watches a movie like 5 movies a week. Then yeah, it's kind of distracting. So, like the other God's Not Dead, this is sort of set in a fictional universe where we have real life people. We have, Mike Huckabee makes an appearance. The Christian rock band, the Newsboys, they make an appearance. One of the things that I think the film does well is whenever it's talking about certain topics, like was Jesus real? The Grace Wesley's lawyer brings in these real life men who've written books on the subject. One of them is Lee Strobel, who I believe wrote The Case for Christ, and he's basically testifying as an expert on this sort of thing, how there's evidence from agnostics and from atheists, from Christian scholars alike, that prove that Christ is a historical figure. There's also another man, I believe he's the author of Cold Case Christianity. He was a homicide detective for about like 25 years, and he used his skills to solve cold cases, to basically look at the Gospels and see if the accounts in the Gospels could be credible or not. I like scenes like this, because basically they bring up the issue without having to resort to some stereotype, without having to resort to the demonizing, furrowed-eyebrowed guy. They just flat out give you a starting point. If you're interested in these issues, look at this work. Basically, Lee Strobel and this other author, I'll put the name here, these two authors basically sum up their points of view quickly. They give you reference material from which to look on if you're interested, and just go on their merry way. I like that. I like that the movie's basically showing its cards, saying, like, we're not just giving you a straw man argument. We're not just coming at this randomly. We're going with scholarly work. And so here are our scholars. Look at their work and take it for what it's worth. With a script that'd be more focused about the discussion rather than these raging sides, you've got the media that's completely demonizing anything a Christian will do outside of reason, versus the Christian population, who can do absolutely no wrong and are never really, whose views are never really brought into contention, whose views are never appropriately challenged. It's just, it's just a fluff piece. There's a scene with the Asian kid, and he's coming to Pastor Dave with a list of 147 questions. He'll look at something like, do unto others as you would want others to do unto you. And the kid's asking this question like, well, I can't follow that. Like, I want to follow scripture, but how do I reconcile, doing what God says with my human inability to do this? I think that's a great question. And I think it's that kind of scene and that kind of dialogue that really gets into the meat of what God's Not Dead should be about. Not these extremist points of view just duking it out on the floor. It should be built with subtle, thoughtful discussion. If you've seen a movie like this, you know how it's going to end up. You honestly do. From the first second you see it, we've got our lone heroine stuck against the odds. She's getting roped into the corner. If you've seen any kind of legal drama, if you've seen Law & Order, you know how this ends. Due to a scattered script and a lot of fluff, a lot of filler getting in the way of real thoughtful discussion, just to appeal to kind of like an emotional vindication. Like, we're gonna present these stereotypes and you're gonna loathe these stereotypes and you're gonna love these ones, and you're gonna get on our side because that's just how emotions run. Due to them doing that and not really going for the more thoughtful stuff, it's not the worst movie in the world. It's almost okay. I give this one 2.5 out of 6. I didn't really like it. I can't recommend it, but there are nuggets of gold in here to where if Pureflix would just kind of focus on that stuff, I think they would have stronger bases. They have stronger footing for the rest of their films.